Now we have a next panel on alternate fuels. So I'll just advise you all to just unmute yourself, share your video. I had disabled those things at the start, so I'm just going to allow you. I think you guys. Okay, great. So I'll just do a quick introduction. So in our next panel, the focus of discussion will be on alternate fuels. Will it be horses for courses or one size fits all? So electric vehicles have been under the limelight with full EV ecosystems being evaluated to increase adoption. Newer technologies such as hybrids, hydrogen fuel cells, CNG, LNG are also gaining heat. What is going to fuel the commercial vehicles of the future? That is the question we are going to answer. So to shed more light on what is the road ahead, please join me in welcoming first Dr. Lokesh Agarwal, who's Vice President R&D at NBC Bearings, Dr. S.S. Thipse, who's Senior Deputy Director, Powertrain Engineering at ARAI. Then we have Mr. Aniruddha Kulkarni, who's Vice President and Head Commercial Vehicle Engineering in the Engineering Research Center at Tata Motors. Then we have Mr. Sachin Agarwal, who is Senior Vice President R&D and Technology at PE Commercial Vehicles. Then we have Mr. Animesh Sahai, who's Head of Customers SARC at Here Technologies. And the final panelist for the day is Mr. Shailesh Zinge, who's Marketing and Growth Initiative Leader at Cummins India. And our moderator for the session is a renowned CV industry expert, Mr. Shyam Malar, who's Executive Director at Differential Asia. So over to you, Mr. Malar, to take it ahead.
Yeah, very good afternoon. Rohit, if you could help me unlock the video part. I think you have not.
So I have granted the permission. You can start now.
Okay.
Rohit, in my case also it is not working.
Yeah. Can you just check, please, once again?
Yes, it says now it's done. Yes.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Apologies for that. I just had to do it because the platform demands it that, when we do a share, so it otherwise causes issues. Sorry.
No worries. So thank you, Rohit. It's a pleasure to be part of the 5th edition of CVF. I think it's turned out to be a very, very great forum over the last 5 years. Great to be on this virtual stage with the industry experts. I think over the next hour or so, I think we will discuss at length the theme of the panel, namely alternate fuels. So let me start the ball rolling by setting the context, by building the backdrop. So I'll have a short, I wouldn't call it a presentation, but to just set the context in terms of what exactly that we will be talking about. So I hope we are all able to see the screen.
Right, we are able to see.
Oh, great, perfect. So it's literally a burning issue that we are talking about. Sorry for the pun. That we in India and the world over are facing this issue in respect to alternate fuels. The runaway growth of the petrol, diesel, and the gas prices has posed a tremendous strain on the personal finances of the common man, as well as it is impacting the trucking community as well. We have witnessed the migration from diesel to CNG, and we heard in the previous discussion as well as to how a lot of people have moved to CNG and are reaping the benefits of a better OPECO. However, there are a couple of critical areas that are driving these alternate fuels. One of them, of course, is something which we are very familiar the world over. I think we are having this climate change dialogue happening. And this clearly is something that is going to haunt the world over the next few decades. So the world is set out to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions. And I think we in the automotive industry have clearly a role to play around that. So we all know that the Paris Agreement has kind of designed to reduce the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. What is very important in the slide that you see in front of you is that the transport sector contributes to approximately 14% of the greenhouse gases. It is as serious as that. And from an India perspective, I think the Indian government spends close to about $112 billion on importing crude. And there's a clear need for the country to move away from this area, so to speak. So what the UN organizations have got together is to develop these sustainable development goals. And within that, we in the automotive industry in particular, and this is something which I picked out from the Volvo Trucks site, is that they are working on some of these key areas which are directly related to improving the environment. That's basically in terms of sustainable cities, in terms of building better infrastructure, which is done in a more responsible way, the circularity of the economy, and of course, in terms of climate action. And that clearly brings on what exactly we are talking about in this alternates. And there are clear roadmaps which have been prepared to see this in a really, really good way. How in Europe, companies are working in a very, very focused way in terms of the transition from ICE to gaseous fuels and then on to fuel cell electric. So this clearly is a good way. And I think we in India are not very far behind. Just a couple of visuals in terms of what's happening the world over. I think we had the world's first fuel cell truck made by Hyundai. Volvo VNR electric trucks are already commercial and running in the US. We have a lot of other players who are in the race for electric vehicles, so to speak. And of course, this one talks about how large competitors, now here is a joint venture between Daimler and Volvo, which are trying to work out together in terms of the fuel cell technology, so to speak. So these are the changes which are happening as far as alternate fuels is concerned. I think the previous panel much was spoken about how the CNG as a fuel is gaining acceptance. Clearly, we are seeing that the CNG footprint of pumps has grown significantly. I think it's expected to go up to about 8,100 CNG stations by 2030, which is really going to be very, very good for the Indian trucking segment. And LNG is another fuel which is showing great promise. And I think the Indian government is trying to reduce crude oil in the immediate future, I would say. And this is my last slide before we pitch into the panel discussion. So hydrogen, of course, is the greenest of the fuels that we are talking about. And of course, I don't think we have too much of issue as we would see in terms of electric, where lithium is going to be a very, very scarce resource. So here we're going to be getting hydrogen from electrolysis of water or by green fuels. So I would think that this is a step which the government has taken in a very, very good way. And I think many of us know that the Indian Hydrogen Alliance has been formed. And I think this is definitely going to be a path for many of us in the auto industry to look forward to and work on this fuel, so to speak. So let me dive into the, I would start by asking Anirudh, who is from Tata Motors CVBU. We all know that we have come out of the development and the huge investments that we have done in BS6, which became operational on 1st of April 2020. And right now, we are also grappling with the CAFE and the RDE norms. The other thing that we are seeing right now in front of us is the rising diesel prices are making us look at other options of gaseous fuels, CNG and LNG. So how do you see this developing, Anirudh, from a perspective of Tata Motors in terms of how are you taking on this challenge?
So thanks, Shyam. So as you rightly mentioned that we have very recently migrated to a BS6 norm.
I think Mr. Kulkarni has lost his connection.
Yeah, so while he joins in, maybe I will pose that same question to Sachin. Sachin, can you tell us as to how Mnhcv is pursuing this?
So good afternoon, Shyam. Nice to interact with you once again, and good afternoon, all the panelists. So yeah, you have asked a very valid question, Shyam, that we have invested a lot of money into BS6 development. And while your question is very wide, I would like to answer on two perspectives to this question. First is we have to see the India growth story. We see we are moving towards 5 trillion economy, and all of us know that auto sector is contributing almost 50% of our manufacturing GDP. Now, if this auto sector growth has to continue, future of mobility will depend on clean source of energy. And emission reduction to meet environmental goals, what you also shared, carbon and other requirement, Paris Agreement, all these are going to become very, very important for all of us. Now, we say that we have introduced BS6, but when we have introduced BS6, what exactly we have done while introducing BS6? We have added SCR, DOC, DPF, ASC, multiple actuators, sensors, so many things we have added in the vehicle. Now, what is for customer? It is only complexity. While we are meeting environmental goal, but for customer, it is only complexity. Now, being part of Volvo Group, we know that is it BS6 that is enough? It is not going to be, because Europe has already started preparing BS7. And when it comes to BS7, what does it mean? One more urea dosing system, one more SCR, one more maybe 48 volt system. So system is going to become more and more complex. Now here comes CNG or LNG. Because when we see BS6, CNG technology, I would say, is simpler than diesel technology today. And it is a familiar IC engine. Indian customer is very well familiar of this IC engine technology. Much less complex after treatment system, very simple catalytic converter, which people are familiar of, that can go. Much more greener, lot of focus from government on bio CNG, bio LNG, which also helps into carbon credit also. So I would say this is the most promising alternate fuel with more than 3,000 CNG station already in place and roadmap available for 10,000 CNG stations by 2025. I would say this is the most promising alternate fuel, which we see from Volvo Asia perspective in coming time. Now, second perspective to this is what is also coming in terms of crude oil prices, what you said. And with all the taxation and discouragement to diesel, what we are seeing today on OPECO basis, there is huge advantage on CNG when compared to diesel. We have done just a broad calculation that if I run a 55-ton tractor trailer on say 1,000 kilometer per day type of running, customer can save up to ₹1 million in a year going to LNG as compared to diesel. So that is the type of OPECO. So that is another, I would say, perspective that why CNG or LNG will definitely be viable. Only challenge here I see is today storage system for CNG, especially for more than 500 kilometer type of range. So, but lot of work happening on LNG side, both on storage side and also on dispensing side. I am confident that this is going to be the technology for future, LNG for heavy duty and CNG for light and medium duty from commercial vehicle perspective.
Great. So thank you, Sachin.
I'm sorry, I'm back. Sorry, there was a cut, and then I think Zoom had created some problem for me. So if you're okay, can I come in?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I was just saying that the treatment as far as the fuel is concerned, it is going to be different. So for in India, there are various micro segments. The duty cycles are different. The infrastructure requirement of the different fuels are different. Or then there is a price parity right now as far as some fuels are concerned. Or there is some artificial price control on certain fuels are there. And then the most important is the commercial vehicle industry, the TCO, the total cost of ownership, which is there. And is also getting bound by government policies, regulatory framework, which is getting generated and everything. And the last but not the least is the energy security. So all these parameters are really governing the future fuels. And that's why I was saying what is coming out right now, and I think my colleague just now also mentioned about Mr. Sachin. CNG seems to be a universal product, a universal kind of fuel which is emerging right now. One is because of price. Second is also about some effect on the emissions, and also a TCO, which I think the customer are going to get it. But whether it's a universal solution on all category of vehicles, it is not. So the segment like a small commercial will have a choice for the fuels, including say gasoline is also becoming very popular in this segment, or in ILCV it is CNG, it will be acceptable. There could be acceptance of biodiesels into these segments and everything. And then certain segment like a buses or heavy commercial will rely also on the LNG going forward and the fuel cell technologies and everything. So these are the different fuels which is emerging out. There is no a unique answer out to this, but I personally feel like a CNGs and the LNG, if it is coming out to be a infrastructure ready, this will definitely can be a universal product. But when we move towards the carbon neutrality or a zero emissions, that time I think the fuel choices will be totally different. And there the R&D work which is coming out on the fuel cell, or which is coming on a say high energy density electric vehicles, those are I think come very handy, and there the different segments will adapt to this kind of. And I'm very proud that Tata Motors got India's first fuel cell buses now also going in the with IOCL to certain agencies and everything. Thank you for it.
Congratulations on that, Anirudh. So let me move on to basically Shailesh, who represents Cummins. Let me have your views, because you are a very, very large MNC with a very major play in engine technology. So how do you see this move from IC to gaseous fuels and then on to fuel cell and electric? Does it not rattle the entire company's innards, if I were to put it that way? And I'm sure Cummins is working on it. So how do you see this panning out from an India perspective? Yes, Shailesh.
Thanks, Mr. Shyam, and good afternoon to the rest of the panelists. Firstly, I strongly resonate with what Sachin and Anirudh talked about on how do we, see future roadmap in terms of adoption on the fuel. I'll try and add a few more points to it in terms of how do we see a long-term roadmap, focusing primarily on CNG and LNG, and what are the watch-outs for us, for the next 2 decades to make this a success. Certainly, we are very bullish and excited with the long-term opportunity on CNG and LNG. If you look at last 2 decades, we have witnessed a good amount of CNG penetration, primarily into the mandated geographies and STUs, primarily, which were enforced. And certainly it was by design, to address high population density areas and address clean energy, clean air in the, proximity to human life. And hence, in the mandated regions, it did not matter, if the CNG engines delivered relatively less power torque compared to the diesel counterparts, and that did not, and even the range limitation did not come across the applications which were driven by mandate in the limited, radius of operation and possibly lesser, no gradient and range requirements. STU certainly came up with additional advantage of dedicated CNG network in the depots. So that made them, certainly much, well equipped to migrate with better TCO and, lower emissions. But however, the next 10 years, we see a major shift in adoption of CNG beyond the mandated regions, and certainly LNG on the long distance, long haul trucks. And we see, different, requirements for both when we're looking at adoption of CNG in non-mandated areas and LNG in, long distance long haul trucks. Sachin mentioned about, close to 3,000 CNG stations, and you also alluded in your previous slide about the kind of thrust we have on the network coming up in next decade. We have come 3,000 fuel stations over the last 2 decades, and we will see almost 3 times the number over the next 10 years. So it's half a time and almost 3 times the jump. And certainly, it would cover almost 60 to 70% of the geographical area and 83% of the, population coverage. Key watchouts, for us to, see that, this becomes a reality, certainly execution and adherence of this network in the 9th, 10th, and 11th CGD bidding rounds. where we see at least the execution is at pace. We mentioned about TCO, but when it comes to TCO for CNG and LNG, it's extremely price sensitive between the delta of diesel and CNG and LNG. So we need to ensure that we have a consistent fuel cost delta between diesel and LNG if we have to promote and see that execution and adoption on the LNG side on the long distance trucks. A rough calculation shows us that we need to have at least 40% differential in the price between diesel and LNG to have a decent adoption and payback for LNG transition. And one last critical factor, where we see, LNG would play important role is the LNG and CNG engines to deliver seamless diesel-like performance. If we need to look at transition on the heavy commercial vehicles. Probably, in the mandated regions, it did not matter a lot. But if you're not able to match the performance of a LNG engine for a 55-ton truck equivalent to diesel, certainly we will have a lot of hindrance and adoption. And we have to match power, torque, fuel efficiency, payload, and range requirements so that we have seamless transition. So to sum up, as Cummins, we see CNG, LNG as a good transition fuel for the next 2 decades. And I'm looking at transition of next 2 decades until we shift completely to zero emission technologies for trucks.
Great. Thank you, Shailesh. On the lighter side, I think what some transporters are talking about of the fact is that once we shift to these gaseous fuels, at least they will not have the challenge of the drivers pilfering fuel. So I think that's going to be a great byproduct for the truckers to ensure that their margins improve, so to speak. But anyway, coming back to the panel discussion, Dr. Tipse, this question is to you. We now have the government, outlining a multiplicity of fuels. They're just not talking only about CNG and LNG. Now, they're talking about flex fuels. They're talking about ethanol blending, and they have kind of more or less mandated the fact that 10% of ethanol blending needs to happen in diesel engines by 2030. So my question to you is that how do you see this panning out, and how are certifying and standard creating agencies like ARAI, how are they moving in this direction to handle this complexity, so to speak?
Yeah. I'll say it's an excellent question. And first of all, thank Rohit ji and Shyam ji for having me here. What we are seeing now that there is a host of fuels being notified, and the primary drive being people are trying to move away from traditional fuel sources like diesel, gasoline, also the invent of electric vehicles, hybrid, so many solutions coming in. And the primary intent is to give clean transportation fuels. Now, as far as the government is concerned, since we are working closely with all the ministries, the intent is that there should be a fuel neutral policy. Normally, they don't advocate any specific technology, and they try to set the regulation bar and allow all technologies which meet that bar. So that is the whole thinking. And for that, the enabling rules and regulations are drafted by the various ministries. So we at ARI are closely associated with this endeavor. And I'm happy to say that almost all the fuels which you mentioned are notified in the rules, CMVR rules, which enable the test agencies like ARI to go for certification of those products. And also in terms of standardization, BIS also has issued fuel quality specifications. And so all of that is already in place for almost all of the fuels. And always there is, whenever a new fuel comes along, this process is followed. Now, as far as ARI is concerned, as a certification agency, we have to be geared up to certify anything. So we cannot say we are not equipped to certify a particular fuel. So we have to keep abreast of all technologies. So what we do is we normally initiate R&D projects. We also undertake upgradation of facilities for certification. So we meant to make sure that any manufacturer, whether from India or abroad, comes to ARI for certification, we should have the competency, expertise, facilities to certify that product. and ensure that it meets the national requirements. And then only it will be like kind of certified, and then RTO will register it, and the process will start. So we at ARI are also having the challenge because there are so many fuel options being tried out, and there are many others which are, some are in the discussion, some are already notified. So what we do is we try to see how the roadmap goes. So primarily, as somebody was mentioning, CNG is the front runner right now. So we are very well equipped with CNG, ethanol definitely. So we work on everything. So practically, as I am working in the alternate fuel area for last 25 years, I have worked with almost all fuels so far, and we have very good expertise in the area for all of that. So we are geared up to meet both the development requirements. We assist the industry for development of products. We also certify that. Component certification is another very big area which ARI and other institutes. Also, we have other agencies like ICAT and also who do certification. But more or less, we are geared up. But I feel that there should be some roadmap, maybe at an interministerial level, because there are many other ministries involved. So which will give sectoral clarity on the application of fuels. So there is no silver bullet. I fully agree with it. There is going to be a host of solutions. And in fact, we will need all the solutions we can get, because this is a big chunk of thing. We are only talking automotive, but there is non-automotive also. So there is off-highway, marine, genset, power generation, then railways, so many sectors still using fossil fuels. So everywhere this is required. So there needs to be a sectoral roadmap, in my opinion. But as far as the readiness of the test agencies and rules are concerned, we are ready for that. Thank you.
Great. That's great to know. Great to know, Dr. Tipse. Thank you so much for that. So let me move on to Lokesh. Lokesh, you had a bearing company. Now we have seen that in the run up to BS6, a lot of upgradation in technology and reliability has been done by OEMs on the trucks and on the various areas. And bearing typically is a very key element for vehicles to roll or vehicles to perform. So from the perspective of catching up with the improved technologies, what is the role that, let's say, NBC Bearings has played in terms of making this as being a very, very important supplier? How have you played a role in making this transition?
Thank you, Shyam, for asking this question, and good afternoon, everybody. So for NBC, it has been an interesting journey when I look at this BS6 transition. As a bearing supplier, we were looking at from two-wheeler, three-wheeler, passenger cars, CV. We saw while CV were not so much, we didn't see so much requirement on bearing as far as BS6 is concerned, because the engine didn't use the rolling element bearing. But for a two-wheeler, we saw significant requirement coming in, and that they were mainly coming in from the tighter controls in terms of tolerances. And we were just observing how it's going to come in. But we were clear, as Mr. Anirudh talked about, the TCO, duty cycle, which is going to come in, and the customer demanding more. Every emission regulation change has some cons from the user perspective and pros also from the overall perspective. So few things which we were seeing and working on was that the fuel economy could be one area where the bearing, if we provide something better solution, could be a winner, because now there's nobody now, everybody has a similar emission level and playing in a very tight window. So how can I give them the better control, better fuel economy, and space is now becoming premium. So can I give the same performance in the similar space with what we call power dense solution? Okay. So we saw from three perspectives. One was the space premium. So how can I build my technology, which is from the material processing, heat treatment, coating, etc. So in the same space, I can give them the right performance. The second, which we were seeing, was on the improved reliability and durability, right? So the system was complex, and we didn't want as a bearing to be another thing which should just run it. And we looked at various solutions to make sure that first, as an OEM, it's an easy to assemble, So we, for example, for wheel, we had host of solution like Mnhcv. And when I say Mnhcv, it is a what called Indian version of preset or a UTRB or THU units, basically in which you have two taper roller bearing pre-assembled, preset. So when it goes for assembly, it just there is no change, and then it gives you long life because my preloads are not changing. Similarly, there was another preset hub in which we don't need to worry about spacer. Everything is really well given the solution. But when we looked at the TCO from the India perspective, it's yeah, these are very good solution, but mainly maybe for European market and US market. And we worked very closely, I would say, actually the Tata Motors to get this Mnhcv bearing. And so that's how we looked at various things. How can we give improved reliability and durability? And third thing which we saw in this scenario was could be a winner was the fuel economy impact. Okay. So how can I give the lowest torque to rotate? We worked internally as an R&D to develop the mathematical models. We invested into the measurement of torque because that's going to be critical. Earlier, there was engine was hiding a lot of things that we were talking about, but then as the engine gets more optimized, we start looking at the next things. So we got this measurement of torque. We looked at the sealing solutions because the seals, especially what kind of sealings we need to give it to. We looked at the internal geometry changes. So that's how we looked at it. And that is actually after the whole everybody met emissions. So that's where we came in, and we are working with all the sort of OEMs to provide as a component, how can we give a so-called sub-optimized at subsystem level or fully optimized at system level. So we have a lot of now ammunition which we can work with each OEM and at what gives them unique.
That's great.
Now, when you talk about, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so when you talk about this CNG, LNG coming in from fuel system, there are 2-3 things impact which comes in again from my bearing. One is the lubricity is going to change. And when the lubricity is going to change, how do I ensure that my reliability is still there, right? And are we having the compatible product? Because we have this requirement, especially on the seal metal, we are okay. But what is happening on the reliability? And as the fuel economy, another lever is how can I get the thinner oil and lesser amount of oil and it still gives the life. So for that, we have already got sort of a study going on. We are looking at the impact of lubricity. We have developed some methodology, how we create initial so-called failure mode and see what is the remaining useful life.
Right.
So in order to sum up as a component manufacturer, though I'm just a bearing and does not, for CV forum does not impact immediately, directly the regulation, but we need to work very closely with OEMs, see what are the trends and where the opportunity would come now or maybe immediately after that's met and work together to get this optimal solution.
Understood. I'll come to you later, Lokesh, in terms of when we discuss EVs in particular, how the bearings need to be different, so to speak. But
can I reflect if you, with just 30
sure.
seconds, I just wanted to reflect, and since it's a very open discussion which we are having right now.
Sure.
So while I think the engines, the fuels will contribute to a large extent on a say a CO2 reduction or efficiency enhancement toward the fuel economy is concerned. But the system supplier like a NBC or some other vehicle system supplier are also playing a very important role. And that is what we have seen when we migrated from a BS4 to BS6. So globally, when you migrated to higher emission level, there is always a negative impact on the fuel economy. But the vehicle efficiency enhancement is playing very important role. The drag reduction, or working on a say engine level systems or vehicle level systems which are there. I will not name it right now here, but these are playing very important role. The cost consciousness of this technology and faster implementation of this technology is also going to give us a lot of headway into CO2 reduction. So this is very, very important role. While I think Lokesh very politely mentioned that he is only the bearing supplier, but that what we are seeing that the THU bearings has played a very important role, at least in our cases, and we are able to maintain our supremacy in the fuel economy as far as in the market conditions are concerned. The second point which I also wanted to reflect to Dr. Thipse. So I think engineering wise or R&D wise, every fuel can be worked upon, and there is a roadmaps are clearly available. Some fuel developments are complementing each other, like a CNG and LNG. You are able to develop a common engine, but the reliability aspects are slightly different. But whether to focus on all those 10 fuels or to have a unified approach towards emission compliances to reduce, to have a TCO parity going forward, and to have a energy security. This is very, very important from this term development point of view. And in a various forums, this topic is discussed. I'm also leading one of the forums at a CEO levels. So this is very, very important. R&D wise, I think as Dr. Thipse mentioned, the roadmaps are available, but we have to take a choice of which fuel and what is our end game. Is a net zero, I think, is a right end game. But if you have to follow a science-based target, then it is like a 15%, 20% is the reduction which we are targeting everything around that. Thank you. Sorry about that. I thought it is very relevant to reflect on these two statements which is there.
Thank you, Anirudh. Very well put. I think you took words out of my mouth. I remember, and Sachin was very, very familiar with this. The way we used to keep increasing the fuel efficiency in the Eicher trucks was to look at parasitic losses. How do you minimize parasitic losses? Look at suppliers of fuel, water pumps. How do you kind of reduce the rolling resistance of that? So I think every auto component supplier has a role to play in the technology going ahead. So I think that's very, very clear. Let me bring in Animesh. Animesh, I was very happy to see the presentation done by your colleague from Asia Pacific, an hour and a half or so ago. So I think that you guys are in a very, very unique space, and I think it's going to be interesting for the CV industry in particular, since we're discussing CVs. So around fleet management, and I think the way if you're going to evolve into connected trucks and remote diagnosis and things like that. So can you just tell us what exactly here technologies will be able to value add into this changing CV environment?
Okay, so thanks, Shyam. I just want to bring out one point, which Anirudh and Lokesh both mentioned. They talked about the optimization and they talked about the impact that it brings onto the fuel efficiency or the vehicle efficiency. So every component plays a very important role when you're talking about this kind of industry, right? Similarly, when you talk about here, now while here may not be a very integral, we are not the bearings, or we don't get into the fuel economy, but what we bring in is what we call as a customer experience. What we bring in is a business monetization aspect, which end of the day differentiates one vehicle from the other vehicle. This becomes a very, very critical aspect. So when you talk about here is in a business, as was mentioned earlier, is in a business of location technology. And we solve what we call as a location-related business problem for all our customers, irrespective of the industry that we're talking about. Now, when we talk about a very specific CV industry, with the truck, bus operators and all that, the biggest challenge that this industry today has is in terms of an end-to-end visibility. The end-to-end visibility, and there was a survey which was done, and which was found that today in this industry, in the commercial vehicle industry, there is only 6% of the people who have a end-to-end visibility of their assets. So this becomes the biggest challenge and an area of opportunity for everybody. So what happens is that when you talk about an end-to-end visibility, this offers the operator, whether we're talking about a truck operator, bus operator, whether you're talking about the OEM, the ability to monitor and report all the movement right from the point of origin to the final destination and everything in between. So here, location technology, what we do is we transform this aspect of the business in three different steps. There are three different steps that we do. One, what we call as is the planning stage, and the second is what we call as the execution stage, and the third is what you would call as a post-trip analysis stage. Now, when we talk about a planning stage, the planning stage starts right from the address enrichment. When I say address enrichment, is the quality of the address that is given to a truck, or to an operator, how you can auto-complete it, how you can ensure that you have the quality of address is so good that you know exactly the end destination that you're going. Then optimizing the tour planning based on your real-time data. Because at the end of the day, when a vehicle starts at the destination X and he has to go to destination Z, there is a huge parameter. There's a lot of variables that comes in between, right? There is a traffic, there's a road closure, there could be weather conditions, there could be rain, there could be a lot of factors. So how do you take into account these real-time data? And this is what we lead to what we call as a pre-planning stage. And using all these factors is where we arrive at what we call as an estimated time of arrival. These are all at the planning stage itself that one has to do, and this impacts every industry, and specifically the CV industry. The second part comes when you go out to execute it. Planning stage is over, and it comes to execution, and this is where you do a real-time monitoring. As there is a movement of the commercial vehicle, it gets monitored real time. You identify in real time the disruptions that happen on the way. There are dynamic replanning that happens, and these dynamic replanning actually implements what we call as a dynamic ETA. What was arrival at, say, 10 o'clock in the morning is now arrival at probably 12 o'clock in the afternoon, or maybe 5 o'clock in the evening, right? But this is not just only dynamic replanning. What is also important is that you navigate with a certain attributes. Look, we are talking about commercial vehicles, so the navigation has to be with what we call as a truck attributes. Now, truck attributes mean that it is important for people to go on what we call the truck verified roads. You know that a truck cannot go into every road in a city, or there are timings, there are timing restrictions, there are bars which is there. So all this is important for them to have knowledge of what we call the tech verified roads. Speed limits, there has to be toll costs, there has to be, then there are what we call as a truck based POIs, which is the places of interest. The truck have their own interest. They're not interested in going into a malls. They're interested in looking at where they can rest. They can interested in looking at which are the fuel stations which are there. Apart from that, the last and not the least is what we call as a post-trip analysis. When you talk about post-trip analysis, once the job is completed, you have to analyze how was the job completed. Was it completed in the time that was defined? What was the dwell time? What was the actual time versus the planned time? And then you try to iron out the issues that you see around that. So these are some of the factors which impacts the CV industry, which here as from using its location technology tries to help, and also help in terms of a data monetization. Because you also got to remember is as these trucks and buses, they move on the road, they are a big repository of data. They're constantly, every second, they're sending out bits and bytes of data, and these data itself can be monetized. So that is another source of monetization, whether it is for the OEM or whether it is for the operators, but they can monetize these data. And as here technologies, using the marketplace solutions that we have, we can help monetize those data. So there are multiple areas that can be helped.
Right.
Sure.
Right. Okay, thank you, Animesh. So Anirudh, in the previous panel, I heard one of the large fleet operators talk about the fact that CNG trucks, I think ICVs, are running between Delhi and Mumbai, CNG trucks, and the footprint of CNG stations is pretty much good. And I also heard in the same panel people talking about how the railways are giving a good fight to long distance haulage. Probably maybe it's happening in the heavy commodity space, but you never know with the DFC coming in place and things like that. Things could get more complicated for the Mnhcv industry, so to speak. So my question really is that today we've seen that the CNG trucks which are there are typically maxing at a power rating of about 110 kilowatt, which means that I think it's typically limited to around 16 tons of gross vehicle weight, for which I think a 10-ton payload is typically what customers get. Now, what is the threshold or the tipping point for OEMs to look at higher power ratings and probably moving on to, let's say, an 18.5-ton GVW or probably a 6x2, typically even for, let's say, e-commerce, who require more of volume and less of payload, so to speak. So what's the tipping point, or is there a Lakshman Rekha between, let's say, a CNG and an LNG, and therefore you would want to play that game accordingly. So let me hear from you.
I will say there are two, three Lakshman Rekhas I will arrange. So one Lakshman Rekha, as we were discussing, is as far as the price parity, which we just now mentioned about that, and there it is very coming up important that right now the regulated fuels are getting edge over the current fossil fuels correct in this into this, and that's why we are seeing the right now the lot of push, and also because of environmental benefit we are able to go there. The range anxiety in this gaseous fuel is also being taken care by the various manufacturers, OEMs and everything. One is with the range extenders and the cylinders, which we are able to package more and everything, and going forward towards a type 4 cylinder. So those are the approaches which are taking. And here the vehicle efficiency enhancement is also plays a very important role. So that range extension happens further. The second Lakshman Rekha, as we were saying, and I think there Shailesh also mentioned about this, the power density requirement has gone up as far as the customer expectations are concerned. So earlier, as you were rightly saying, the people were happy with the 110 horsepower, 130 horsepower trucks on a say 19 tonner segment or 18 tonner segment post IL. But going forward, like even a 28 tonner, 35 tonner, or long haul 40 tonners or 55 tonners are also becoming a need. And there also the technology which are getting applicated as also on the CNG and everything. So there I would say that it is the power density is going up, and that's why the Lakshman Rekha is totally depending on the how the product is positioned. It is higher turnaround time, it is a positioning, or it is only the fuel economy which is getting positioned, that is there. And there the power density enhancement is becoming a very important, and that's why I'm saying it's a very fluidic kind of a Lakshman Rekha here on all those sides. And third, as we said, a Lakshman Rekha between a LNG and a CNG. So while the engine more or less remains same, right now the infrastructure availability is actually the governing factor onto this. So while in various forums there's a discussion happening between west to north, there would be availability of also the LNG infrastructure. But whether the similar infrastructure would be available for between say north to east, this is a question mark. And whether it is similarly between say east to the south. So this is very, because heavy trucks are the national permit trucks. They cannot restrict themselves within one territory. There is an approach also which is we are saying that where the Lakshman Rekha is slightly becoming like a fluidic in that nature, if I may say so. It's a cluster approach. So you have your own station for the LNG and you are able to so in my understanding, there is nothing a clear answer which is available whether there is a Lakshman Rekha, but everywhere this is possible movement is happening onto this side. And so that's why when we talk about the sectors, small commercial will always remain with the CNGs and then ethanols of the world. ILCV will have a LNG and a CNG options, which is going on to this. And since you asked me specifically about the CNG, LNG, I'm answering to about this. Yes. Heavy commercial range of vehicles and buses will adopt both the fuels, in my understanding. And there all those 4 Lakshman Rekhas which I mentioned, this will play a very important role onto this. But I think we will cross the borders always, and I hope there won't be Ravanas there standing.
Right. Thank you. So I think we'll cross the bridge when we come to it. Coming to you, Sachin, and I think I'll move to the passenger side of the business. Now, we see a lot of these city corporations or municipal corporations or smart cities, wanting to either change their fleet from diesel to either CNG or to electric. Now, I think typically since I think as what was said by Shailesh is that the supply of CNG or LNG for a city or for a state transport undertaking is not very difficult because they have depots and they can have these dispensing units there. How do you see this shift of vehicles which are currently being used by these city corporations and therefore an overpowering case for, let's say, induction of a CNG bus over an electric? How do you see this this challenge being kind of addressed by OEMs like you to convince an STU to go in for a CNG than an electric? so to speak? So that's my question to you.
Yes, Shyam, very good question. I would say that from STU perspective, if you will see, CNG will definitely make much better sense as compared to diesel or electric both. Because when it comes to electric, they are investing heavily on their initial acquisition cost, and also they are putting up a lot of investment for setting up infrastructure. So that is one way, but there is a lot of, I would say, push from government side on electromobility. So that is something is driving STUs to go and buy more of electric vehicle. But at the same time, many cities, if we see, they are moving towards CNG. And even if you see DTC, while they go to electric vehicle, but at the same time, they are also releasing tenders for CNG. So CNG demand is definitely there. And what Anirudh was also saying, and you were also mentioning that currently also there is one mindset is there that CNG vehicles are not good performing vehicles. So that one mindset is there, which is somewhere we feel that some of the STUs are reluctant whether they go to CNG, will they have robust product, are they going to have good performance, vehicles should not stand in between on the road, because some of the STUs did not had good experience earlier on CNG vehicles.
Right.
So that is one mindset, that is where CNG is getting some resistance, which we are working with many STUs from Mnhcv perspective, and we are getting very good response also with them. And what Anirudh was also mentioning, that with increasing power density requirement and OPECO, which is given, bus segment will become one of the major user of CNG and LNG. CNG should be good enough for STU perspective, but even I would say that for intercity perspective also, if we see, there is huge opportunity that LNG can be used for those 600, 700 kilometer type of usage, wherein they have a lot of control because they are moving from one place to another place, route is fixed, and this can open ground for further exploration. Only thing is requirement of a good engine there.
Right.
On high horsepower, what you said, there is hardly any good engine 110 kilowatt, beyond 110 kilowatt in market. So probably that is one entrance for intercity segment. But from STU's perspective, I would say that more effort from OEMs like we are doing, other OEMs are also working with STUs. Definitely this will open the gate for CNG applications.
Yeah, thanks, Sachin. Shailesh, like I mentioned earlier, Cummins held the pole position as far as the CNG engines. Typically, when the ultra low floor buses were used in Delhi, I think probably 20 years ago. Now we are seeing that the shift is happening, but what's really happening, and I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, there is no pure play BS6 CNG engine, let's say, which is about 250 horsepower or thereabouts, which is typically required for, let's say, an intracity operation with AC and all of that stuff. So in the absence of that, what's also happening is that a lot of STUs are wanting to retrofit their diesel engines with or convert it into CNG. So typically this would mean potentially a loss of business for a powertrain company like Cummins. So how are you really addressing this? But could you walk us through in terms of what exactly is the product that we will have from CNG from Cummins, which will help address some of these concerns which was raised in the previous panelists?
Sure. So first of all, I think it's a myth that there are no products which could match the performance of diesel when it comes to LNG. There are global products being there for almost 2 decades. It's about when is the right time and where is the infrastructure to introduce, even if you introduce the engine. And I'm more specifically talking about LNG here, where you will see the need of high power and torque very extensively, because there you're talking about addressing long haul trucks and as well mining trucks, which inherently would need higher power and torque. Now there are 2 ways how we are addressing that. Certainly we are engaging with government very extensively. In fact, just last few days back, there was an industry interaction with MOPNG and oil marketing companies to look at how are the current LNG infrastructure progressing? We're quite delighted and surprised the kind of focus MOPNG has got there, and a date-wise plan for the first 50 LNG stations coming up in next 6 to 8 months. So that gives us certainly a lot of confidence in investing and coming up with the engine. We're also working actively with SIAM members to propose the blueprint of how should the LNG infrastructure be across the country. And I'll just pick up a few points where Anirudh mentioned about how do we see to it that the east corridors and and we have a seamless connect so that the transition for heavy commercial vehicles could be addressed. And that's where we have worked with SIAM partners, industry partners to map up the 1,000 fuel LNG stations based on the national highway and the freight density covered on major national highways. Right. The final objective is at least on the Golden Quadrilateral corridors, every 50 kilometers, you will have an LNG station, and the rest of the highways, every 100 kilometers, LNG station. But right. To start with 200 kilometers of span of LNG station, and that should address most of the national highways so that adoption can be facilitated. Right. Other area of what we are doing is advocating through SIAM members to include CNG and LNG specific components under the auto component PLI scheme. Because when we are looking at LNG, there are certainly still some components where there is good amount of import content. Take an example of cryogenic tanks and plumbings. So their industry would need support to help drive localization so that we could reduce the acquisition cost. Got it. And last but not the least, my colleagues pointed out a need of a higher horsepower engine. And in next few months, we'll certainly have engine from Cummins to address both CNG and LNG with a diesel-like performance to address a truck market up to 55 ton. So we'll have a performance of a diesel LNG engine with torque and power, meeting the current diesel truck requirements. And that should be a big game changer, I believe, to facilitate LNG transition in the truck market.
Right. Thanks, Shailesh. Yeah, I think you clarified the CNG part, which is what my main question was. But yes, it's really a clear, literally a no-brainer that long distance trucks would need to be necessarily an LNG as compared to a CNG. Thanks for that. I'll come to now Dr. Tipse. As I just mentioned a little while earlier, there's a lot of so-called retrofitment or conversion of vehicles from diesel to CNG and diesel to LNG. Diesel to LNG is happening in many cases by a lot of these fleet operators for converting their tip trailers. And then of course, there are tenders floated out by STUs to convert their diesel into CNG, so to speak. So what are the typical guardrails which as a certifying agency or from a safety perspective, what are the guardrails that you are advising the ministry to ensure that these changes are done by either organizations or companies which are certified, who have safe products? How exactly is ARAI contributing to this body of knowledge?
Yeah, it's a very pertinent question. Basically, retrofitment was allowed in India to kind of help the fast acceleration or shifting over to CNG from diesel. But in the past, the experience with retrofitment has been mixed because there were some fly-by-night operators, some unscrupulous elements who used to use substandard kit components. So what was done was in the rules in terms of there's a AIS 024028 standard, which we refer as for the safety guidelines during certification. So that kind of elaborates all the requirements in terms of safety and what has to be followed, safe distances, component wise. And definitely all the components have to be certified by authorized test agencies like ARAI as per either ISO or ECE standards. So that rules are well in place. But when it comes to the field, unfortunately, we feel the field mechanism is not that strong. And many of these retrofitment agencies, they don't have the proper technical knowledge or in terms of facilities or they have constraints, and they sometimes, many a times, corners are cut, and that is something which is a worrying part. And because of all these issues, if you see for BS6, retrofitment is still not allowed as far as CNG and LNG is concerned. There is going to be the kind of rules coming in for allowing it now. But over the period, there was a talk in terms of discouraging retrofitment. And in terms of OEs, on the other hand, are following all the rules. They are making sure all their vehicles are compliant. They follow all the procedures. We don't hear many complaints as such. But on the retrofitment side, the retrofitted vehicles, the users complain we are not getting enough power, the vehicle is not climbing gradients, and there is a lot of issues. In fact, that kind of tarnished the name of the clean fuels. So government took a very conscious stand, and as far as the ARI is concerned, the certification procedures are well laid out. There is a different set of rules for the retrofitters and test agencies. We have been advocating that there should be a uniform this thing. And also in terms of retrofitment, ARI took a very standard stand that we will not allow any substandard or any kind of wrong fitment or those kind of things. And definitely all the vehicles have to be certified as per the rules. And if it is not, it is affecting the safety, then it should not be allowed. So that is a clear stand. That's what we have done.
Thank you, Doctor. I hate to say this, it's a very large topic, and I would have loved to go, I think, but we only not even covered the electric and the hydrogen part of the discussions. Rohit, I certainly believe that this would probably call for another panel, so to speak, but I think these are really exciting times ahead for us as industry participants and experts. Interesting times, challenging times, but I think we have a role to play. And of course, ultimately, like I said, it's the climate change that's going to be a key focus for the economy, for the country, and all of that stuff. So I would like to thank you, and Rohit, I do agree that
we can do a few questions, like specifically on hydrogen and EV, because since we didn't cover that in the discussion. So you can also scan the Q&A box. I'll just share one question that I've received from Mr. Srinivasan. He said, what kind of penetration is expected on hydrogen fuel for Mnhcv when compared to CNG? What could be the cost comparison between them, considering the available infrastructure in 5 years' time? Would any of you like to share your thoughts on that? Yeah, Shailesh and Aniruddha, both of you can take that one.
Yeah.
Aniruddha,
you want to go ahead?
Okay, I'll go. Then I just wanted to reflect also one is on the hydrogen, and I think the intermediate step also will be say battery electric vehicles on the Mnhcv side. I personally feel, and one, I think his question, what I captured is the 2-3 points which he mentioned. One is about the infrastructure availability, which is also trying to govern say the overall market penetration. So there I think the hydrogen will definitely become a fuel for the future. The R&D works are clearly on in the industry side, and as I mentioned that we as the Tata Motors will be launching already the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle in the market. But as far the trucks are concerned, I think the most challenging part will be on the battery or a fuel cell vehicle. I'm just trying to combine both the answer. Is one is about the battery, is about the range anxiety, the payload parity, which we have to see how much we are able to, and how we are packaging say high energy density batteries onto this, so that we are able to offer a similar payload to the end customer. As far as the hydrogen is concerned, I think infrastructure is going to play a very, very important role, and their availability of say dispensing unit, availability of say green hydrogen, because very, very important. Hydrogen is abundantly available in India, hydrocarbon based, but that is not going to serve our purpose towards the net zero. So availability of the green hydrogen and the availability of all development locally available fuel cell stacks and a balance of power pack is actually very, very important. We need to be energy security wise, we have to be self-reliant in India. And that's why as I mentioned, the fuel cell stack, balance of power packs, and then calibration for Indian use cases is very, very important in our our point of view. The regulations are available, and thanks to Dr. Tipse also, he has been also leading this, and he is and various forum we are having a discussion. So this is what I see. But to answer to his last question about the penetration point of view, it is going to take some time. By 2030 or by 2035, I think we are able to see a lot of migration towards these technologies. But immediately in the near future, it could be in the single digit kind of a penetration, which we are able to see onto the side.
Sure. Shailesh, would you like to add?
Sure. So one thing which we certainly are assured that, it's too early to place your bet on one technology at this moment. So it would be certainly, what we have seen last 100 years on depending on one technology. We don't see that happening in future, at least. And we feel that it will be more than one technology where we will have to complement and drive our road to zero emissions. I completely resonate with Anirudh on the electric part. I'll just add more on the hydrogen part. We see that in two parts. One is green hydrogen generation and hydrogen consumption. So there are two different parts. Hydrogen generation, we see with the kind of geopolitical environment we are and the kind of thrust we have on renewable energy, we will see a strong propulsion on the green hydrogen generation and electrolyzer manufacturing in next 5 years. That's a strong conviction. We also acknowledge that the early adopter markets would not be automotive, but industrial applications, where you see hydrogen or energy being used in steel production, cement production, petroleum production. That's where you have huge quantum of hydrogen required, and the decarbonization objectives could be achieved much earlier there. When it comes to automotive, we have another challenge on fuel cell, which is still a kind of a quite new area where we need to develop skill sets, develop localization, develop indigenization of components on gas efficient layers, catalyst thrifting, so that we could come down on the acquisition cost. So next 5 years, we see a lot of that skill set development and technology development maturity, and a lot of pilots to demonstrate technology on the fuel cell for the automotive sector. One last point where we see maybe we have not discussed extensively is we see a strong contention from a hydrogen powered IC engine also coming up in future. And that's one of the strong contenders where at least OEMs would not have any major changes on the vehicle level, and the vehicle levels architectures can carry over, if we are able to make that successful. We're very, very happy to share that Cummins is already testing 2 hydrogen powered engine platforms, 6.7 and a 15 liter, which could potentially sustain and address substantial part of the global markets. And that is one complementing solution which we see over the long term, and very apt for Indian market. We see that as a hydrogen IC engine.
So can I just add further on what Anirudh and Shailesh said? So as we are seeing, as we are working with various global players, there is no one technology which we can bet on at this point of time. And every technology is going in their path, including the OEMs are trying various solutions and seeing what works for them. As Sachin said, Anirudh said, like we need to look at the TCO, we need to look at the operating condition, we need to look at the duty cycle, we need to look at infrastructure. And that will play a very critical role, which technology would have higher penetration in India. And that will all drive overall the optimum solution which we can give to the customer. So I'm seeing, as we are working with various OEM, like in externally also say on EV, we clearly see that one day there's one architecture, second day another architecture, and then we are just giving the bearings. And so suddenly another thing which we just came across was we were working and they said, yeah, you were nominated and next week we hear, oh, we are going to outsource this. So as a company, we all need to become very agile, and we need to keep looking at various things which are working and provide a solution. So the design capability, the engineering capability, the R&D capability is going to be critical for all of us in India to make a product for India, which is a winning product. So I thought I'll just say that.
Great. So for the next question, Animesh, this one's for you. Range anxiety is one of the top concerns when it comes to, the move to EV. So I just wanted to understand from you that, what are some of the things that you guys are working on in terms of addressing that? If you could, give a brief answer to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so you're right. When it comes to an EV, the biggest challenge is the range anxiety. When you sit in the car, the driver really does not know whether he'll be able to reach his destination. So there are solutions available, what we call as a range assistance, and something called what we call as a predictive charging. These are a couple of the solutions, which is a total bouquet of solution. Part of that, what we have. In case of range assistance, what we do is, there's something called isoline writing, which basically helps in terms of determining all the destinations that the charge can take, and it also takes into account the various operating conditions. It takes into account the road conditions. It takes into account, for example, if you put in up a condition of going onto a particular location which is at a higher altitude, then it will definitely reduce the range that your vehicle will do, and it will do what we call as a waypoint using a solution called waypoint sequencing. It will reroute you to the nearest charge stations. And not only that, the charge stations also, today the charging stations have multiple types. Some of them high charging stations, high power, low power, the kind of connectors which are available, the time slots. So it takes into account all that to help the user in terms of routing him correctly and giving the right information, which helps to a large extent from a range anxiety perspective.
Okay, great. Mr. Malad, do you want to take the next one, or should I ask? I think Mr.
Go ahead, Rohit.
Okay. So
no, I'm there. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah. So this one is for Mr. Sachin Agarwal. Fast charging, flash charging, battery swapping. There is no one size that fits all. So how will CV industry for regional distribution of say 30 to 400 kilometers range manage charging versus onboard battery?
So Rohit, I think a lot of discussion on alternate fuel, but frankly, when it comes to electric vehicle, there is no clear answer as of now, effective answer that can replace onboard batteries. Fast charging definitely seems to be the most promising solution. Some of you would have read about this test, and they have come out with some solution on battery side that can be charged in 5 minutes time. So those are the type of solutions probably that will provide some breakthrough solution in this direction. But when it comes to regional distribution today, all the hopes are on the infrastructure side, where government is putting a lot of effort on creating some highways or some overhead charging, those type of solution. And from technology perspective, which Agnes was also sharing, there are opportunities available. However, all the technologies are work in progress as of now. But fast charging, some solution, breakthrough solution will definitely come that will solve the problem for this regional distribution.
Great. So a final question for Dr. Thipse.
Rohit, if you are okay, I will just add to the previous question. So while I think in the intra-city kind of operation, whether it is on a buses or a trucks or a small commercial area, this range anxiety, I think, has slightly become a blur in my understanding, because the solutions are available in them already, and people have already put in a lot of efforts. So you have a high energy density batteries which are there. You have various technologies to improve the further regeneration, which is known in the system. And then some of the efficient architectures of the vehicle, whether it's a very intelligent battery management system or battery cooling system, or we have a next generation traction motors which are coming out, or people are working on e-axle, which are already applicated on many vehicle platforms which are in the market, and we are market leader into this. So this is really helping. And onto this, the question which is probably I think he was asking is also from a intercity kind of a moment, and there the next level of battery technology which is going to help out, and some like opportunity charging in between for 1 hour with a fast charging, which is going to help us onto this, whether to move from a present LFP technology to NMC, or NMC to a next generation, say, solid state battery, where I think this is slightly moving in a faster space. And with a say battery cost coming down, or say motor cost coming down, this is, I think, is getting very faster space. And this is what we are experiencing it. We are not facing a challenge of range right now.
Okay, great. So final question for Dr. Thipse. So sir, when it comes to EV powertrains, what is some of the progress that we are seeing? Are more OEMs coming up with higher power ratings for SCVs, LCVs? What are some key concerns and challenges that you see on the powertrain front?
Yeah, actually, a lot of work is being done on the EV side. A lot of even ARI is involved very actively in development of EVs, certification of new technologies. Challenges, if you see, the main thing I believe is the battery weight. I believe is one of the challenge in terms for heavy duty. And as like rightly said by Kulkarni sir, is the overall the fast charging and the capability to move between cities, and those things, those are very important as far as the intercity movement is concerned. So because when you talk commercial, obviously it is going to move to longer distances and go to far-flung areas of the country. And I see the infrastructure also is very critical in this, because if there is a proper infrastructure available, then that will definitely encourage the movement of those vehicles, which right now being kind of in city use. So a lot of electric buses are also now coming in, and even our Pune municipal transport, a lot of electric buses are inducted and they are doing well. So I see that there is a definite movement gaining traction. But at the same time, I would also like to stress that other technologies also will be there. It's not just going to be a 100% transition. Like all the speakers have stressed, there is no silver bullet, no one single solution. So there will be multiple solutions competing with each other, and finally the customer will decide. He should have all the options with him, and whichever solution works in a particular area, it will work like that. So our job is to create an ecosystem where all solutions can coexist. So that is my take on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
So, Mr. Mala, would you like to do a quick sum up? Then,
So I think it is an exciting discussion that we had. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I think it's very, very clear that the transition from ICE to the new age fuels is definitely going to be complex but exciting. I think the ultimate beneficiary in this whole exercise is obviously the customer. So I think, but of course, the pressure is going to be on a lot of you gentlemen. But having said that, I think what we are seeing now in this new age way of working, and of course, particularly in this, is that there is a need for partnerships to be done by OEMs, because I think that the body of knowledge which is there with some of the startups and some of these new companies is very unique, and it needs to be kind of bolted on to the OEMs basic foundation, so to speak. So I think this is going to be very, very important. I think there are interesting startups, and I think there are collaborations which are already happening. So I think these are very, very good times. So I wish you all the very best, and thank you so much. It was a very, very engaging discussion, albeit it was virtual. Thanks, Rohit. Thanks for this great opportunity. Great. Have a great
I would request you all to just switch off your mics and videos, because that interferes with the sharing of the next session.
Sure. Thank you and bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.